There couldn't have been a more predictable move made the entire offseason than the release of Preston Smith. I'm guessing it's one that completely slipped the collective attention of this particular nation. It really shouldn't have. Good morning to you. Good Tuesday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Daily Shot of Steelers. It comes your way bright and early every weekday. If you're into hockey and or baseball, I also offer daily shots of Penguins and Pirates in the same place that you found this. Little extra pep in the step today, if that isn't coming across. And that's because even though I knew, he knew, you knew, everybody knew Smith was going to get released from the moment that he was acquired, no matter how well he performed, and he did. He had his moments. He played his role, fourth outside linebacker, but there was always going to be a $13.4 million cap savings if he were put out now. And he just was put out now. And what that means, I'm going to read this number to you exactly, is that the Steelers now have cap space of $55,743,775. So $55.7 million, the ninth most of any team in the league entering this offseason. And one thing I'm going to keep sharing with you, because I believe that it's relevant, is that Omar Khan still has the very real capability of being able to reconstruct other contracts, including, however it is, that he chooses to handle an extension for TJ Watt or a possible extension for Chris Boswell. He can bake into those babies all kinds of nuance that buys him even more latitude. But it's hard to imagine what he would do with that much latitude, because even if/when he signs Justin Fields, as we were going back and forth over this yesterday, to a deal that, I don't know, let's just say it's somewhere in the 10 to 15 million range. That seems to be the general figures that come about the most often here. That's still 40 plus million sitting there. 40 million for one season. And even that doesn't begin to touch the extremes at hand, because let's say, for example, you look at certain positions, and no, I'm not going to suggest that the Steelers are so loaded you can't possibly add to their roster. You don't lose your final 5 games and think thoughts like that. But I can go at specific scenarios. Here's one. Offensive line. Tell me where you would spend, at least spend significantly on the O-line. Everything that I've heard related to this line is that it's going to come back the way you saw it. Dan Moore's gone. I'm not guessing at that one. James Daniels is almost certainly not going to be brought back. So your O-line is set with only one of them, Isaac Seumalo, getting paid like a veteran. The rest of them are kids. For better or worse, they're kids. And they're kids that you've already put a lot of other football capital into, meaning the high draft picks. How about tight end? Are you going to spend it on tight end? No, probably not. You just did that on Pat Freiermuth, and you have a really good young complement in Darnell Washington, with still a long way to go on his rookie term. Running back, well, you got to pay Jaylen Warren, but it's as a restricted free agent, which is nowhere near what he'd get if he were just magically available on the open market. Wide receiver, both George Pickens and Calvin Austin are still on their rookie terms. The defense is a whole lot more complicated, I guess you could say convoluted, given the sums that, let's say, for example, Minkah Fitzpatrick is getting paid to spend time way out in the pasture. But those players, by and large, are either signed or the Steelers don't want to sign them. Right outside cornerback leaps out for me in this regard. Dante Jackson had his 5 picks. He was a good soldier and all that other stuff. He also had a significant and recurring back issue. He also had trouble keeping up with routine one-on-one coverages, and they're determined to have one-on-one coverages. How do they replace him? Well, you can pretend that that's going to be a rookie meaning a literal rookie taken right out of the draft. And I don't think that's going to happen. And I don't know that you would do that to a corner anyway, unless it was someone the caliber of Joey Porter. But that's where you spend the money. Defensive line, according to only everybody, is going to get addressed in the draft. And not just by the Steelers. It sounds like there's going to be an express lane at the draft for teams just collecting these guys. Well, that's a rookie term as well. Can you add through free agency on the defensive line? Of course you can, but it's almost certainly going to be depth in that context. So where else do you need to spend? You following me on this now? Work your way all across everything. Where else do you need to spend? It's a pretty good situation for Omar. Now, he wouldn't agree with me on that because GMs hate to hear stuff like that because it's, it's pressure and it's the whole, I don't have to spend everything. I can save it for some other day. I can put it into this player or that player to make sure they don't leave Pittsburgh. But even that's not really on the table. It's going to get spent. That's the way this team operates. It's not going to get 100% spent. You almost never see that anywhere. But you also almost never see the Steelers entering a season with more than $10 million in cap space. There will be signings this spring and summer. When we come back, J1Q. This segment of Daily Shot is brought to you by our good friends at Mike's Beer Bar. They're located on Federal Street, directly across from PNC Park. Mike has more than 500 beers on tap, including from more than 50 local breweries. Stop in and say hello. Tell Mike we sent you. Mike's Beer Bar. Today's J1Q comes from Dylan. Says, DK, the most disappointing thing for me about the past 8 seasons has been the loss of the Steelers' aura. And we would always be able to figure things out, beat the teams that were better than us on paper. Do you know what I'm talking about? I do, Dylan. I do. And yet I'm not all that sympathetic to it. And here's why I say that. A big part of the Steelers' aura, at least as I see it, of course, we're all open to our own interpretations of this, has been that they're going to win more games than they lose. And I know that immediately lights a fire with everybody. I get that. I also get that it's part of what you're talking about here. The Steelers can be seen as a third place or even a last place team the way they were heading into this past season. Don't forget that part. This was supposed to be a last place team, according to most people who study this sort of thing. I don't just mean the hot takes sorcerers. I'm talking about, actual analytics, actual projections. The Steelers were most people's 4th place team in the AFC North. So rising above that general expectation, to me, was something that perpetuated, is that too strong? I don't know. Sustained that aura. When the Steelers were 10-3, be honest here. I know that's a hard point in the season to try to dredge up what you were thinking because so much crap happened after that. But when they were 10-3, you weren't, I wasn't, nobody was doubting this aura. If anything, the aura might have been seen as at least partly responsible for what had happened to that stage. So when did the aura die? I'm going to stick with this one stubbornly. It did not die in Philadelphia. The Steelers played their you-know-what's off against the Eagles. Outclassed in almost every capacity, they somehow almost came away with that thing. If it hadn't been for a guy who never fumbles, fumbling out of nowhere. But after that, that's when we start talking about aura and things like that. Doubly so when you get to the end and they gave the lame effort that they did against the Bengals, the lame-er effort that they gave in Baltimore in the playoff game. So, I don't know. Are we talking about 8 years the time frame that you set up, or are we talking about just these last 5 games? Don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting any of this is good enough. Remember, I'm the one who publicly called for a change at head coach after this, and I did so on merit and will stand by it with a trident by my side. But I don't know, with the aura thing, here's another thing, and this is probably the best answer I can give you, all right? When we start talking about aura and culture and the Steelers way and stuff like that, only one thing is going on. Steelers lost a game, or they lost a couple of games, or in this case, they lost 5 games. They still are who they are. They still are who they were. For better or worse, that actually is part of the problem. And everybody clinging to these intangibles, to me, doesn't really further the discussion or the debates that need to be had here. Yes, there's a way that the team, both collectively and individually, should carry itself. But first and foremost, and way before any of this intangible stuff, they need better players. They need better coaches. They need a better head coach. What they don't need, in my opinion anyway, is more platitudes, more placards that they need to reach up and touch on their way out to the field. If we want to start really having the dialogue that makes this franchise better, get past all that and get super specific and start talking about, I don't know, clock management in the final 2 minutes of a half, and really dig in deep and see which teams do that better than anybody else. See how the Steelers can get better at it. But nobody does that. Everyone just brings up, Mean Joe Green and Chuck Noll and thinks that if you just get more boisterous, everything's going to be fine. I appreciate you. I appreciate the question. I really do. I'm not going at you. It's just that this subject in general, this bites at me. We're going to have a double shot show later today. That'll be up at 4:30 p.m. And we're going to have another one of these tomorrow. I hope you'll be back with me.